Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be explaining a circumstance that has become commonplace in the schoolie world, particularly in the realm of hiring a schoolie builder and having someone else essentially build the bus for you. A lot of people in this community are doing the do-it-yourself way, which I highly recommend, but there's another demographic of people who know they're not good at construction, they don't have the experience, they don't really have the drive for it, but they still want to experience the schoolie lifestyle, or they choose the schoolie over an RV for all the reasons that we do. So I think it's helpful to not point fingers at someone for not doing everything themselves, and instead, when you get taken by an incompetent schoolie builder, we point the fingers at them. I've been in this community for about 5 years. I've been full-time in my own self-built rig for I think about 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years. And so I have seen quite a bit. I power schoolies with solar, and so that's kind of my domain, solar, electrical, and I do consults to help people get everything right the first time around and make a bus fully sustainable off-grid. That said, I still have quite a bit of understanding, knowledge, experience, and have basically been in hundreds of buses asking them what they liked, what they don't like, what they would do differently. So all of that kind of ties into my perspective on what it takes to build a bus properly and to build it well. If you are going down this path of picking a schoolie builder, there's a few things I'd like to encourage you to do. The biggest one is speaking to previous clients of the bus builder. This is something that people overlook, and oftentimes people are bought into the social media presence that the builder presents, which is almost in all circumstances completely in their control. They don't have a place for negative reviews. You'll find this. They'll have a Facebook page sometimes, they'll have a website, they'll have all these places. They're great at photography oftentimes, and they present well. But it doesn't make their buses livable, and it doesn't mean that they're competent. So the best you can do is speak to as many previous clients as possible from the bus builder. Otherwise, you really have no reference point and you're just taking a huge risk. Now, these people have an established social media presence to the point where, I can understand someone sending massive deposits, getting pictures and being bought into it. So I really am not a fan of the people who point fingers at, oh, why would you go and spend $20,000, $30,000, $60,000 on a bus that you haven't seen? Well, let's point the fingers where they belong. If you've seen me on the Facebook groups, you've probably seen some of my posts where I'm encouraging people to be very careful with schoolie builders. I've called out schoolie builders by name multiple times, and I've called out their work by name. I've gotten cease and desist, verbal like text, something not anything credible. I've been cautioned against libel and slander and all those things. So I'm real cautious when I do this, but not overly cautious, because the truth is pretty much the truth, right? So today I'm going to show you a video of a schoolie builder of a bus that was just done, and it's going to basically speak for itself, but I'm going to have a commentary. This now client to me is someone who saw some of these Facebook posts. They reached out to me and said, hey, we got a bus built by Nomadic Homes, and we just picked it up, and it's got a bunch of problems that we're not happy with. We'd like for you to take a look at it. Can you advise us on this? And basically that's how I met these people. Around this time, I was already headed to Schoolie Swarm, and this is here in Florida. So I was already headed to Schoolie Swarm, which, by the way, awesome event. If you're in the bus community or thinking about it or just got a bus, show up to one of their events, even if you've just got a shell. You'll meet the community. It's awesome. It's a super positive thing. So I encouraged the client to bring her bus to, well, it's a couple, but I encouraged them to bring their bus to Schoolie Swarm, told them I'd take a look at it, we'd get some other people to look at it and just give them our opinions on it, right? So that's what wound up happening. So I'm going to try to watch this video and narrate it as we go and point out the things that are incorrect, that are unsafe, that are just not good practices. Now this first part is basically the outside of the bus. It's painted. I believe the clients actually did that work themselves, so I can't point any fingers at that particularly. They have this bus done by the builder, and there was something that went on with the windows, and the windows were put in upside down, or it was really unclear. But they actually had to remove them and reinstall them to get them correct, which meant possible destruction on the inside because of how they framed the windows. Now there is some text on these windows and it's hard to tell which way is, up or down. But the reality is it doesn't matter. Clients shouldn't have to figure this out. When you're paying for a professional to do this work, you're trying to outsource this. So you're not having to make these decisions. You're trusting them. And the bus builder did pick these windows. The next thing is the front door. It was built pretty well. Apparently the builder had this outsourced, and so really this is a big issue with buses, but they did a pretty good job on it. It's solid, it's heavy, welds all look good, although they should have primed and painted all of this. There's also this massive gap that the owner pointed out right here, and they have had leaks kind of around the trim, so it wasn't sealed that well. So it's like a lot of good work, but then not complete. Big piano hinge for the door, so that's going to hold up, but it leaks and it's not painted. The other thing I noticed when I walked in was, oh wow, you guys did Advantech and the proper insulation, which I think is the pink stuff, and that's the Chuck Cassidy way. So I told him, I was like, hey, that's great. And then the clients told me they actually did that part themselves. For some reason, this wall is cracked, broken, and I guess that's like wood glue or something, putty, to try to clean it up. Now, it's worth noting that this was not a complete bus build. This is just a partial bus build. This is the electrical panel or electrical box for a receptacle, and it's obviously not square. A lot of weird trim work. I'm no professional, but it's just a weird way of doing things. Pretty much nothing square. This is the wood-burning stove platform, and you've just got pieces sticking out. This corner is just slapped together, however it could be done. Like, I don't know how you finish this exactly. Again, if they're do-it-yourself, if this is a do-it-yourself build, none of this is all that bad. But this is a professional build, and it's not a professional who's built 1, 2, 3 buses. More on that later. The wiring hanging up here, that's all factory wiring, not a big deal. That's something that the clients agreed to take care of basically. But then these compartments up here up top in the front, they're definitely not rectangles. They're not square. And they got massive gaps up here that are just filled with caulking. I mean, within reason, but it's a lot of cleanup with caulk. I mean, look at this thing. Maybe it's hard to tell on camera, but the thing is all sorts of wonky. This too. I don't know what shape this thing is, but it's supposed to be a cosmetic cover-up for the engine, and it's just a hot mess. The wood even attached to the front, which I don't show, is just like nailed on there barely. And of course they do something over here. That door, by the way, up top won't even open up all the way. It gets jammed. Just really poor construction. I mean, we'll just cut this out of the way. Again, do-it-yourself people, I'd be like, man, solid. Here's a few things we could patch up. Here's the electrical, some more of the electrical. Massive gap in the wood. Here's another one. Blew out the cutout. That's not a huge ordeal, especially if you're going to do something else cosmetically in here. More trim work. You know, bus building's hard, but if you're a professional and you've built more than 2 or 3 buses, a lot of this should just be figured out. Look at all this wood everywhere. I guess some of this is their version of pocket holes, which then, yeah, I look over here and I told them, I was like, well, look, they know how to do pocket holes. This is great. And it turns out the clients actually did the pocket holes themselves on the drawers. This is how I think it traveled when they delivered it. So it scraped up that nut, that fitting. And I mean, just look at this electrical. This is not how you do it. That's just jamming it anywhere it could possibly go. This 2x4 or 2x3 is just the wonkiest 2x3 possible. Why would you use that? Makes no sense. Same here. Edges are all torn up. It's like, is this just wood that was lying around? So none of this stuff, like I said, is square. It's just, yeah. This is the electrical panel. They've got 4 wire there, not using the 4th. And this is actually an interesting thing, worth pausing here. So because I do electrical and I power buses, I understand this part. And what they have is a 12-volt charger. It's an AC charger. That means it's plugged into house power and it charges 12-volt batteries. Well, what they've done, which we'll see in a minute, is they've taken a positive and negative from the engine batteries that comes over to this AC-DC panel. And the way they've got it wired is the bus batteries, which are made for starting the engine only. They're never made to be discharged. Once you do that too many times, you damage your batteries permanently. That's a $400 or $500 mistake with engine batteries. And I've seen this with this builder multiple times. She puts in this blue box, this Victron, and she ties it in directly to the engine batteries. It's fundamentally wrong. It allows you to discharge from your engine batteries, and perhaps the idea was, well, later you'll do solar, and well, it's the wrong device for having in for solar later, so it just has to get ripped out of there. In the meantime, you're going to wind up killing your engine batteries. It's just completely wrong. There's a lot of weird things with the electrical, the way it's wired. They've done some Romex, which is the solid copper strands like you'd use in a house, and then some of the lines are stranded. So that gets all sorts of confusing and basically should not be done. And now I pulled off a few of these cover plates to take a look, and this is what I found. This is actually one of the original issues that the owners pointed out and said, hey, is this right? And I said, absolutely not. That's just pulling a faceplate off. For the record, that's not how it's supposed to be done. Every one of these faceplates, every one of these boxes were not square. Look at that. It's just angled up and they just put caulking all around it. This is elementary stuff. This is not rocket science. That one didn't line up, so they just put a cover plate on it, left the half-inch gap. Look at this guy. These are like cutting things square, cutting wood. It's like step 1. So then it gets even trickier over here. They've got, oh yeah, the plumbing. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. They've got this line running, which is feeding to the bedroom. And so this won't make sense unless you understand electrical, but they've got 10-3 on a 20 amp breaker running all the way behind the wall to this right here, 10-3, running to this box. Then it splices, jumps over to this side, passenger side of the bus, into this box. Then it jumps again, comes all the way back down and around. Oh, they ran out of wire right here. So we'll just splice another one and send it right back up to the other receptacle. That's just vastly incompetent. So now to a bit of the plumbing. All this could be done better. Wouldn't use a corrugated pipe for the fill. That's just going to leave water in that pipe. Unless on the inside of that smooth. Could be. I'm not a plumber. PEX tubing, that's all good. Some of these are left open, but this is not a completed bus, so I'm not going to point the fingers there. There are a lot of splices with the plumbing that are not necessary, which makes me think that they're just using the bits and pieces that they have lying around and putting them together. That's not appropriate, which would also explain the use of Romex and the use of stranded cable. The combination of the two is just very weird, very odd. Now on the back, you're looking at a back shelf they made that you can't really tell in here, but everything's just not even close to square. It's just throw up some wood, put in a self-tapper, and slam it into the closest piece of metal. This is super common. Now oftentimes with her builds, this all gets covered up cosmetically. So, and you know, pros and cons there, but usually you don't know what's going on behind the walls and it's not good work. Just trim here, like what? You just ran out of wood, or what's the plan? Water pump. It's a brand I've not heard of, but you know, can't nitpick on that stuff. but it does point to perhaps she's just using what she has lying around. As I said before, she's got a positive and negative going from the batteries, which should not be the case unless you're using a DC charger to charge other batteries. But these are the lines, just loose welding cable dangling underneath here. I think there was a couple zip ties that kind of secured them. And then at one point, there's, I guess they ran out of cable and they had to splice it together, so they jammed a lug onto there. Not the worst solution in a pickle, but you know, you're a professional. Just have rolls of this stuff. A couple zip ties here and there. Plumbing, dropping through without any sealing. You can also see this plumbing. Now this plumbing underneath, yeah, and the electrical just gets jammed up through the bottom. That's not a big ordeal, but it's got to be secured. And then look at all this plumbing. It's zip ties here and there. Now this run going right here by the tire, you know, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. We've got limited space on these, so I'm not too critical of that, but they could have done something to protect it. And this gray tank, totally fine with the gray tank, other than the untreated, unpainted metal. They should have painted the metal because it's just going to rust. So I realize this video is probably not the cleanest, the most fluent. I only got a little bit of footage. I should have done a better job with that. Should have been a little more intentional, but I was going to Schoolies Forum to hang out and have some fun, so I didn't get everything I needed. So this is an interesting circumstance that this bus owner is in, right? This work was not done by a budget builder, both in cost or in what's supposed to be quality. It cost them $45,000 for this. This is a partial build. Now the builder did use spray foam, and that's one of the only things that I can say that's positive about this, because, you know, at this point at least the walls could be ripped out and be redone, and you would wind up with a decent shell that you could then patch up everything else on. But they didn't want to do all this work themselves, and they certainly didn't want to now have to pay someone else to come in there and do all the work for them. So now they've got $45,000 that they've spent on this bus from a builder, Nomadic Homes. Her name's Courtney. She's been doing this, been at it for 5 years. Ever since I've been in the community, this is what she's been doing. I would guess that she's probably done 30 buses, probably had her hands in 50 buses, something like that. She's been very active, and a little bit of this is going to be on the anecdotal side, but years ago, her claim to fame, her first, what I'm going to call a gimmick, was I built a bus in 30 days. When I first met her and saw the first bus I ever saw, I think I was following her on social media, and I saw her bus. It looked awesome, and I went to a tiny home event in Orlando. I saw her bus, and I was like, oh, this is a bus that she said she built in 2 weeks, and I was actually shocked that it took that long, because it literally was the quick and dirty, which I'm not a hater of the quick and dirty. You do it sometimes, but it was quick and dirty. It was throw up, you know, pallet wood or something onto the wall, find the closest piece of metal and do a self-tapper into it, and I think she wound up building her brand on that. She was with a guy, a partner, whatever they call it, and they were going around doing bus building. At some point, I had cleaned up after them 2 or 3 electrical solar jobs that they just did a really poor, unsafe job on. And apparently with these, at least with one of the clients, they had been paid to do some carpentry work. They screwed all that up, and the client was not happy with it, and they just were like, oh, we're good, we'll just do something else. And right, so that's years back. Well, then that relationship ends. I think at that point she rebranded as the all-girl bus building team with her and her sister. And then I think at that point I was like, well, gosh, she's doing bad buses. She has done bad buses. And I think what happened there was she was able to, whether true or not, blame all of the previous work onto that guy who was helping her, or she was helping him. And then now the rebrand, you're kind of starting fresh. And so fair enough, I'm kind of keeping an eye on this builder, because I have had unhappy people with unhappy clients with their work. So I just keep my ear to the ground. So I had observed she's doing the same thing, doing 30-day bus builds, or now it's the all-girl bus building team. And I saw her pumping out buses left and right, really big on social media. Everything's incredible and awesome. but I was still seeing a lot of this messy electrical. I mean, she was posting messy electrical and unsafe electrical. So I actually sent her a message and we interacted back and forth, directly. Oh, probably after I made one of the posts where I was showing, hey, if your builders are doing this, they're not competent. They're not doing what they should be. And I shared pictures from builders that were posted by them of the work that they're proud of. And so she sent me a message demanding that I take it down, that I don't have rights to it or something. But it's public, so I wasn't concerned. I think there was some legal verbiage in there or something. So at this point, somewhere in the mix, she winds up not working with her sister anymore, and she's like now outsourcing jobs. I saw one of her solar jobs that looked like it was pretty solid and competent, which means clearly she outsourced that. And I told her, hey, if you're going to be doing this, you really ought to be learning how to do this stuff safely, learning how to do electrical, learning how to do plumbing, learning how, like, any of the basic stuff to do it well. And she's like, well, why don't you tell me how to do it instead of just criticizing, which I understand that argument, but I'm not the one building buses, and it's kind of up to her. It's her due diligence to get this stuff right. So at this point, she had not done someone dirty enough, or I did not have a direct person that was unhappy with her bus in order for me to feel justified in doing a video like this. Because a video like this comes out after someone's been burned directly, and now there's kind of a moral or ethical obligation to caution the community. Now, I'm just using photos and videos of her work, and if for some reason she has some explanation for this work, then that's great. We can do that in public, and maybe she can do a video walking through it, how all this is actually safe and actually appropriate and good work and worth the $45,000. I'm fine to have that, and if that's the case and I'm incorrect here, then this video can be deleted or something, however that works. But at this point, I think there's certainly a dollar amount that needs to be reimbursed to these victims. I'm going to call them victims because of this work. And I think there's some accountability that should occur with Nomadic Homes, Courtney, and I'd really think that maybe she should go get some carpentry lessons, some electrical lessons, if she's going to continue this work, or she just needs to stop. Now, at this point, I have been here before with Epic Schoolies, calling out some of their work, and that really didn't go anywhere. Eventually, they ran off with hundreds of thousands of dollars of clients' money as deposits that they never got back, and he's currently on the run. A couple of the others I was making posts about and naming directly, they've also been outed now, and I don't know where the stories have gone with those. A couple of them are shut down, but who knows. Another one was Alexander Vango or something, another client. I have a video on that bus, a white bus with an absolute disaster. He isn't building buses anymore, so that's a win, but it did go to small claims court, and the victim tried to get something out of it. It winds up being this exhausting process where ultimately the client, the victim, loses. What typically happens at this point, once I post this video and all the text that goes along with it, is a bunch of people start pointing fingers at me saying, well, you're just trying to generate business, which I don't build schoolies. Or you have the builder coming out and pointing to my credibility, or telling me I'm not an electrician, telling me I'm not a plumber, I don't build schoolies, telling me really all those things don't matter, and I don't care. Because what they should be addressing is their work and why it's actually good and why what I'm saying is invalid. That would be the appropriate response to something like this. So I don't think there's any excuses for this build. At this point, when you've built this many buses, there are just no excuses. It is a very difficult thing to be a bus builder. It's even more difficult to do them well. That's why there's very few good bus builders out there. And it's also very difficult to scale and hire people that can do some of this work for you. In this case, everything's visible, so it's not like there was work that was outsourced. So I don't think she could point to, oh, I outsourced this, they didn't do a good job. Because at the end of the day, she's the contractor, she's the builder, she's responsible for all this work. And it's not a few mistakes, it's not like some of the carpentry was bad, it's not like some of the electrical was bad. Everything was bad, and is still bad. So I don't think like mental health or stress or being overwhelmed is an excuse or acceptable for something like this. Look, I'm trying to run a business myself. I am overwhelmed. I'm becoming slow with clients. That's really troublesome to me. I'm neglecting some clients, and I'm doing everything I can to scale and grow this business and serve the community. When I'm not doing a good job, that's completely on me. I can't make excuses. So this is very typical circumstance, and now the owners are going to do everything they can to salvage this bus. And I think ultimately what would be the proper thing is for the bus to go to someone else and to get everything that was supposed to be done correctly, and that Nomadic Homes pays for it. Because there isn't a scenario with this level of work and quality of work, there isn't a scenario where the bus gets returned to Nomadic Homes and they correct this. It's clear that that is not within the capacity of their competency. So it's a doozy, and I hate it, and I'd much rather have a video like this and avoid countless other victims from becoming victims from someone like this or any other schoolie builder. So this video is just a necessity. In summary, bus building's hard. Finding a credible bus builder is very difficult. There are very few of them. If you do go to select one, find one that does have public reviews that they do not control the access of. Find one that is willing to list, share, tag their clients. If they're not tagging clients, that's one of the telltale signs. They are not wanting you to go and do research on them. They're not wanting to have that exposed. It's very difficult, but there are a few of them out there. Most of them are booked, and they're mostly busy keeping their heads down rather than sharing on social media.